Hey everyone, this is Kayla Martin Gant from the Mississippi Library Commission, and today we're going to be talking about podcasts for new listeners because a lot of you have expressed that you don't really know a lot about podcasts, and seeing as how I do in fact know a lot about podcasts and I am extremely enthusiastic about them, I will be glad to fix that for you. So let's go ahead and get started. So first of all, like I said, I'm Kayla Martin Gant. I am your continuing education coordinator here at the Mississippi Library Commission. And like I said before, I am its resident podcast enthusiast. Other employees here definitely like podcasts, but nobody yells about them quite as much as I do. So really, like I was definitely the one to tap for this. Just a brief agenda. We're going to talk first a little bit of history and some of the benefits of podcasts. Then we're going to get into the different podcast apps and networks. We're going to talk genres and content. And then I'm going to give you some suggested listening and some resources. So first, we're going to talk history and benefits. What are podcasts and why should they interest you? Because they definitely should, I promise. So first, what is a podcast? The general definition is it's a digital or video file or recording, usually part of a themed series that can be downloaded from a website to a media player or computer. The invention of podcasting, and I say that kind of loosely because there's a little more to it than suddenly people just going, "Bam! What if we did this?" But for the most part, they were invented by Adam Curry and Dave Weiner in 2004. And the term podcasting was used for the first time in a publication by Ben Hammersley in The Guardian in February of that year. So they've been around for a long time. They didn't get like super popular at first. In fact, like most of you have probably really started to hear about podcasts in the last like 5 years or so, especially due to the pandemic. There's been a big bump in podcasting, but they've been around for a very, very long time. And why are they so popular? Well, first of all, because they're entertaining. There are a lot of podcasts that are primarily for entertainment, and there are a lot that are mixed of entertainment and education. There are a lot that are, informative, educational in their entirety, but even the informative, educational ones do try to be entertaining as well. Podcasts are also extremely accessible because typically you don't have to like pay for them. Most apps are free or at least have a free option, and anyone can make a podcast. Anyone can make a podcast at any time. It's just a matter of whether or not people are going to see it. And it is one of the last like bastions of independent content and independent media, because while a lot of podcasts eventually once they get more popular and to help them financially continue to grow, they may have sponsors, but by and large most podcasts are not beholden to any particular network or any particular rules. Anyone can make a podcast, with their phone. And because of that as well, they are extremely abundant. There are so many podcasts. We don't actually know the full number, but there are at least 2,725,729 podcasts and at least 119,924,420 episodes in the world today, according to Listen Notes, which is one of the biggest discovery and statistical podcast websites. They keep track of this stuff, and they do a really thorough job with metrics and with numbers, and they account for places like inflating their numbers. So the real numbers may be even higher than that. There are, close to 3 million podcasts just by themselves. That is wild. There is no way that you could listen to all of that ever. And that's one thing I'm trying to help you guys with too, because a lot of people, once they get into podcasts, they find themselves very overwhelmed just with the sheer amount of stuff to sift through. So don't worry, I've got you. So on that note, we're going to move into podcast apps and networks. So it might seem like Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts is all anyone like really needs to stream a podcast, and like technically that's true. And those are the apps that like automatically come on your phone. But there are a lot of different podcast apps, and they serve multiple purposes. They can function like as a podcast player, of course. A lot of them also function as directories, as search tools. Technically, some of them work as advertising platforms. Um, and also, a lot of them have very different functions. Because what people want from a podcast app varies. Some listeners, they might prioritize, like a really, really good, thorough, robust search feature to make it easier to find new content. And then others might want like a more streamlined interface. And they might, place more value on an app that's like customizable and has like a lot of different sound features to enhance the listening experience. And some people might just want something that is as simple and intuitive to use as possible. And the great thing is that much like podcasts themselves, whatever category you're in, there's something for you. I'm not going to go through this entire list with you guys. A PDF of this presentation will be available in the video notes. So you'll be able to look through all of this. But I just wanted to cover that some apps are exclusive to certain platforms. And then there are some that, you can use on any device. There are a few that are Android exclusive. There are probably twice that amount that are Apple exclusive or Mac exclusive. But the ones I'm primarily going to talk to you guys about today are the ones that are non-exclusive. And by the way, this is not a comprehensive list either. There are way more apps and places to listen than this. This is just a list of some of the most common that people tend to use because they're the most reliable. And the first three on the non-exclusive list are the ones that I'm going to talk with you guys about today. So these are three of the most frequently used cross-platform podcast apps. First, you have Pocketcast, then you have Podbean, and then you have Castbox. Now, all three of these have very good free options. But as with, most things nowadays, if you pay a little bit, you can get some bonus features essentially. For Pocketcast, this is probably like the most used independent like of platform app used all over. Most people I know use Pocketcast. The basic offerings, they have an option where you can create playlists. I believe all of these apps, you can create playlists, but the thing about Pocket Cast is that they also have a really, really customizable audio controls. Like you can skip silences and intros, and you can adjust certain elements of the sound depending on just how you want to hear, because a lot of people have very different hearing ranges, and it can also speed up or slow down whatever podcast you're listening to without changing the pitch, which is great because you may be like me, you may talk fast and you may have trouble following people that talk too slow, but also you don't want everyone to sound like Alvin and the Chipmunks. So this is a great tool for that. Also, the best thing about Pocket Cast is that it has cross-device syncing options, which means you start listening to a podcast on your phone, and then you need to get on your computer, and maybe your phone dies and you need to plug it in. As soon as you open Pocket Cast on your computer, it will pick up like what episode you were on and where you were on it immediately. Like it's just cross-syncing that whole time, which is very useful because then you don't have to go back and search for what you were listening to. It has special features because if you pay either 99 cents a month or if you pay all at once for $10 a year, which is not much, you get Pocket Cast Plus, which gives you 10 gigabytes of storage, and you can like customize the themes and the widgets and stuff in the app. Which, if you're a new listener, you might not want to mess with all of that. But if you are someone, like me, who listens to many, many, many different podcasts, having that much extra storage and being able to, customize things a little more might be worth it to you. So then there's Podbean. It has several different tiers that I'm not going to go into, but I'm going to explain why that is. The free like podcast listening app. Um, that's, the main thing that y'all are going to be concerned with. It's a lot like Pocket Cast, but it's a little less impressive in terms of its audio customization. And it just, looks a bit different. But the additional tiers give you access to podcast hosting features, because Podbean is kind of a multi-use app. There's another newer one that's kind of like that, called Anchor, but um, it gives you like a lot of different tiers, for a lot of different features, where you can not just listen to podcasts on this app, but you can, record and edit and distribute podcasts as well. And then there's Castbox, which is free, and then the premium version is $1 a month, which isn't much. It's also like on tier with Podbean, and they both of those are set up very, very similarly. But there are like some differences, and some people find Castbox to be like a little more intuitive. And the cool thing that Castbox has that the other one doesn't, is it has a social media option where, inside the app, you can, talk to other people and engage with other people about specific shows and specific episodes. So a lot of people are going to find that interactive element really, really attractive. So I did want to kind of show you guys what they look like. So first, here are some screenshots of Pocket Casts and what they look like. A lot of people really like Pocket Cast too, just in terms of visuals, because as you can see on the far left there, it lists all of your shows with like, it looks kind of like a quilt almost, and it makes for like really easy and good like screenshot, Instagram kind of photos. But also, like, if you, look toward the right, you can kind of see how, shows look as you're listening. And you can kind of see, how a show will look if you like look through it. And then on the far right is the option where you can change the theme and appearance. And you can change like the app icon. And some people won't care about that at all, and that's totally fine. Some people are like super into aesthetics and, wanting everything to look just right. So, that may be something that you're into. Then there's Podbean. Here's some screenshots. And all of the screenshots I got are from like the App Store, where you can download these. So if you see these screenshots again, just so you know, like, that's where they come from. As you can see there on the left, Podbean also, gives you the option to make playlists. And it shows you, all the different ones you're following, and, you can set all that up differently. It shows you your play history. The one with the kind of peach colored background, like, helps you keep track of, episodes you've listened to, what you have, what you haven't. And it's a pretty like simple app visually speaking. But for a lot of people, that's going to be more beneficial. They don't, want anything more complicated than that. On that note, you may find Castbox to be a little better than Podbean. It really kind of depends on you and, what you find intuitive in terms of an app. You can see on the far left, like at the top of that, you can see, it immediately shows different categories. It shows you, like live streaming, available audiobooks, and also Castbox has a thing called Zen mode, which just plays like really chill music or sounds to help you relax, which I think is very cool. But also, on the far right, you can look at that. That's showing a screenshot of like a library, and you can see which episodes you've downloaded as opposed to which episodes you want to stream. Which, if that is confusing to you, let me explain. If you download an episode, it's downloaded into the app on your phone, so you can listen to it and not stream it live, which means like if you are somewhere where you don't have like a super good signal, you can still listen to the episodes that you've downloaded, because it won't be having to stream live to your phone. My husband and I travel to visit family, and they live kind of out in the boonies, and so we try to download a few episodes before we go anywhere, because that makes it a lot easier to like listen to something and let us have fun in the car without trying to stream something and have it skip every 10 seconds. So just some things to consider. I want you to think about, like when you're looking at these different apps, think about the layout. Is it intuitive? Can you customize it? Is it, difficult for you to even use? You don't want to mess with one that's going to be difficult for you to use. Look into the catalog. Does it have a lot of shows? And some apps have like app exclusive content. Um, like Spotify, for instance. Most of you know it for music, but they've gotten really, really into podcasts as well. And a lot of them have, Spotify original content. Really, it's like, any streaming service like Netflix and Hulu. They've all now got to have their exclusive content because that makes you want that app as opposed to something else. Um, Consider the audio options. Can you change the speed and skip silences and boost vocals? If that's something that you're going to need or that is going to be very convenient for you, then that's something you want to look into. Discovery. How is the search feature, and does it provide recommended content? There are some apps that are like really, really good with everything else, but they don't have a great search feature, and they may not provide recommendations. And if you're like me and you like to discover new podcasts and new content all the time, then that's something that you're really going to want to consider. There are different apps that are a little better at recommendations. There's one that I didn't list here in terms of like talking about in detail that I've used before. It's newer, called Himalaya, and its recommendation features are really, really cool because, if you click on a show, it automatically shows you, other shows that are similar to that. If you click specifically on an episode, it will show you episodes that are similar to that. And Spotify does that particular one as well. But what Himalaya also does is it shows you playlists that other Himalaya users have created that have that show or that particular episode in it. And that's also a great way to discover new content. And then features, can you make and share playlists? Does it have content besides podcasts? Like I mentioned Spotify earlier, it was very, very known for music and it still is, but it's also got podcasts now. And a lot of different apps have they have essentially what are like their versions of like Great Courses Plus. They have educational features.
And a lot of them have audiobooks. It's not just the Audible app that has that. I know Spotify has some audiobooks. I know, I think Pocketcast does. A lot of them have that as well. So there are podcast apps that are really simple, straightforward, and that's what a lot of you are going to want to use when you're just easing into it. But there are a lot that have tons and tons of different content. So that's just a few things to kind of keep in mind there. So now we are going to talk about genres and content. What are your options? How are they categorized? And like I previously mentioned, there are a lot of options. And if you do get overwhelmed, think of it like this. Think of it like a library with every category of nonfiction imaginable, from psychology and history and politics and all different kinds of science and everything, as well as narrative fiction and biographies, personal storytelling. It's There is so much content and so much information, but if you think of it like a library, just an extraordinarily large digital library, it'll be a little easier to kind of thread it around in your brain. Now, here are some podcast types. This is absolutely not a definitive list, but this is, stuff that's typically going to be what you see first. There's comedy, obviously. Comedy often goes hand in hand with society and culture related topic. Well, I say most, but a lot of podcasts are going to kind of overlap in categories. So it, may depend on the app, like how they're categorized, but either way. They're also Comedy podcasts are also frequently conversational, and they don't necessarily have like a really strict structure. There are some podcasts that are essentially just a few people talking, which is great. And then there are some that, are set up in a very, specific kind of way. Then, the society and culture that I'm talking about, this is a very, very broad category. It encompasses true crime, media analysis, like people talking about specific movies and TV shows, travel, cultural identity. This is where a lot of podcasts talking about different, cultural movements and uh, different, like people and how they interact, and just all of that kind of falls under society and culture. Then you have science and tech. You have everything from astrophysics to like weird medical history to linguistics. On the tech side, a lot of podcasts talk about like specific tech things, like news and updates and troubleshooting and hacks. And then others are more broad and kind of talking about it from like a historical evolution perspective. And those also tend to kind of go hand in hand as well. History and politics, same deal. This is a very broad category, or it can be very, very niche in terms of like the overall coverage. In terms of like you have ancient history, you have current events. It can be, a podcast that's just, like history 101 or horrible histories, just covering that. But then you can have very, very specific podcasts that are like, this is about the Tudors specifically, or this is a whole podcast about one historical figure, or one weird group from history that people don't talk about super often. I mean, I'm explaining all this so you guys understand, like, there is that really anything you could possibly want, there is something for you. Um, eh, I have said numerous times to people, there's a podcast for that. Um, because there's also fiction, which like horror, sci-fi, and fantasy make up a lot of the narrative fiction. But romance and mystery and comedy, those are all like very plentiful too. And audio, and that's what it's generally going to be referred to, in the app as audio dramas. They are often extremely well done, extremely compelling. It's sort of like listening to, it's kind of our answer to old timey radio shows, and they're excellent, and I am obsessed with them. But then you also have stuff like business and self help, and uh, this is everything, from like podcasts from industry leaders, talk about marketing tools. They may be, like self-employment gurus that may be talking about, a specific career field. There are a lot of, organization specific podcasts. There are lots of library podcasts, for instance. Um, and then these range from like very formal to very casual, depending, on the whole like vibe of the show and what they're going for. And like I said, this is just some of the podcasts that you could categorize and listen to. There's also lots and lots of podcasts in these categories that are geared specifically for children. Um, and there are some that are also very like location specific. There's one um, that there's an, I think it's Hidden Nashville. That's just all about, like the history of Nashville and stuff that people may not know. Um, so there's also, organization specific, location specific, and then everything under the sun pretty much. So here's just a little bit of suggested listening. These are some podcasts that I personally listen to and that I know are very popular, and everyone that I've suggested these to has enjoyed them. So just if you are super overwhelmed and you kind of need a place to get started, you can look at these. First, there's Ologies, which is hosted by Allie Ward. Allie Ward is a humorist and a science correspondent, and she talks to experts in a particular field, and asks them, weird questions and has them kind of explain what all is going on and take listener questions. And it is truly fascinating. Because they cover everything. Like it's listed up here: trees, drunk butterflies, Mars missions, like everything you can imagine. And also, this one has transcripts and resources. There's just a massive array of topics. Then there's You're Dead to Me, which is hosted by Greg Jenner. You may know him from Horrible Histories. He also does Homework Histories, or Homeschooled Histories, I think, which is like a history podcast geared for children. But this is a history podcast for people who don't love history, and of course, those who do. Essentially, Greg brings together a comedian and an expert in a particular, historical event or person or era, and the expert is essentially teaching the comedian. There's a little quiz after. It's super fun. It's super funny, and they have like radio friendly episodes that cut some of the adult content out. If you are wanting, to share those with kids. Then there's You're Wrong About, hosted by Sarah Marshall and Michael Hobbs. Mike and Sarah are both journalists who every week they talk about an event, a person, or a phenomenon that has been miscast in the public imagination. It's very thorough and well researched, and it has like a ton of different topics, essentially of what we collectively, societally are wrong about in terms of the narrative that we all kind of know about things from Iran Contra to the life and times of Anna Nicole Smith. They cover everything. You have Spirits, which is hosted by Amanda McLaughlin, Julia Schifini, and Eric Schneider. Spirits, it's kind of a history and comedy podcast about mythology, folklore, and urban legends. And every week they talk about something different from around the world, and they also have really great listener stories and like listener submitted episodes. This also has transcripts and content warnings, and it's just like a nice, fun mix of spooky and mythology and folklore, and it's really fun and really interesting. And then the last one is In Case You Missed It, which is a Slate podcast. It's hosted by Madison Malone Kircher and Rachel Hampton. Madison and Rachel twice a week gaze deep into the online abyss and tell you what's gazing back. It's basically two millennial women who are explaining and analyzing and discussing internet culture for better and for much, much worse sometimes. It's very funny. It comes out frequently and the episodes are short. So this may help some of you, including some, of the youth services librarians, kind of keep up with a lot of things that are going on that you might not be able to keep up with on your own just because, culture, especially youth culture, especially internet culture, changes on a dime. So, very briefly, also, here are some resources. First, some websites that can help you discover new podcasts. Like these aren't listening apps or anything. They are, podcast discovery websites essentially. You have Podchaser, Discover Pods, Listen Notes, and Bellow Collective. And then some roundups. I've just, thrown a few things up here. There's 100 podcast syllabus. I think it's by Vulture. Which just talks about 100 of popular podcasts. Then there is another podcast discovery tool. There is 41 podcasts for kids, 15 audio drama podcasts to get you hooked on fiction, 20 of the funniest comedy podcasts you might not be listening to yet. And then I've linked you to my Reader's Advisory Pinterest board in the section that is for podcasts and music because it is primarily podcasts, and then like an occasional music playlist that's themed. But again, like all of these that are underlined on this page and throughout the rest of the presentation, those are links that you'll be able to click in the PDF that I'm going to link in the listening notes. So, if you have any other questions, please feel free to email me. You can also call me, but I'll be more likely to be able to respond to something like this via email because I can always link you to more stuff. And I do have a ton more resources where this came from. So just keep in mind if you are confused about any of this or you have any other questions or you just have some requests like, hey, can you find me, some good podcasts about X, Y, and Z? I will be more than happy to help you do that. And if you need anything else, like I said, you can just email me there. And I hope you learned a little something and find the world of podcasts slightly less intimidating now. Thanks.